Greetings! Welcome to Saint of the Week, the show where we choose one saint's feast day from this week and discuss their life and their impact on the church. The saint for this week is Saint Josephine Bakhita, whose feast day is February 8th, this Thursday.
Josephine was born around 1869 in the village of Olgassa in the Darfur region of Sudan. Her family was well respected and prosperous due to her uncle being the village chief, and she grew up in a happy, carefree life, free from suffering. This came to an end when she was about 8 years old and was kidnapped by Arab slave traders. Cruelly forced to walk 600 miles to El Abid, she had already been bought and sold twice before she arrived.
The trauma of her kidnapping and slavery caused the young girl to completely forget her name, and so her captors named her Bakhita, which is Arabic for lucky. In El Abid, she was bought by a rich Arab who used her as a maid to his 2 daughters. They liked her and treated her well, but after she offended one of their brothers, he became furious and kicked her so severely that she could barely move from her bed for a month.
Bakhita's 4th owner was a Turkish general who had her serve his wife and mother-in-law, who were very cruel to all their slaves. She was beaten every day, and, along with all the other slaves, had 114 intricate patterns carved onto her body as a permanent marking. In 1882, however, El Abid came under the threat of attack of modest revolutionaries, and the Turkish general made plans to return to his homeland. He sold all of his slaves except for 10, who he planned to sell when he passed through Khartoum, Sudan's capital city.
It was here in Khartoum in 1883 that Bakhita was purchased by the Italian vice-consul Callisto Lugnani, who treated her in a kind and loving way. 2 years later, Callisto had to return to Italy, and Bakhita begged to go with him. They escaped the besieged Khartoum with a friend, Augusto Michieli, and traveled 400 miles to Suwakina, the largest port in Sudan. In March 1885, they left Suwakina for Italy and arrived in the port of Genoa in April.
The travelers were met by Augusto's wife, Maria Teresa Michieli, and Callisto gave Bakhita to her as a present. Bakhita's new owners took her to their family villa, which was about 16 miles west from Venice. She stayed there for 3 years, becoming nanny to the Michieli's daughter Mamina when she was born in 1886.
Augusto Michieli came into possession of a hotel in Sudan, and he decided to move his family there. The process took longer than expected, and by the end of 1888, Teresa wanted to visit her husband in Sudan, even though the transactions hadn't been finished. Since the villa had already been sold, Bakhita and Mamina needed a place to stay, and so Teresa left them in the care of the Canossian sisters in Venice.
It was during this time that Bakhita became drawn to the Catholic Church. She said later that she had always known about God as the creator of all things, but she had never truly known who he was. The sisters answered her questions, and Bakhita discerned a call to follow Christ.
When Teresa returned to Italy, intending to bring Bakhita and Mamina to Sudan, Bakhita refused to leave. For 3 days, Teresa tried to convince her, but Bakhita would not be moved. Finally, the superior of the Institute for Baptismal Candidates among the sisters complained to the Italian authorities on Bakhita's behalf. The case went to court, and on November 29, 1889, the court ruled that since slavery had been outlawed in Sudan since before Bakhita was born, the Italian law did not recognize slavery. Bakhita had never legally been a slave. For the first time in her life, Bakhita was free to control her own future.
She chose to remain with the Canossians, and on January 9, 1890, Bakhita was baptized with the names Josephine Margaret and Fortunata, which is the Latin translation of Bakhita. On the same day, she was confirmed and received her first communion from Archbishop Giuseppe Sarto, who would be the future Pope St. Pius X. 3 years later, she entered the Canossian novitiate, and she took her vows on December 8, 1896, welcomed by Cardinal Sarto.
In 1902, Josephine was assigned to the Canossian convent in Schio, where she spent the rest of her life. She worked as a cook, sacristan, and doorkeeper, and was in frequent contact with the local community, who grew to love her and revere her as a saint. The only extended time she spent away from the convent was between 1935 and 1939, when she visited the missionary novitiate in Vimercate. While there, she talked about her experiences and helped prepare other sisters for work in Africa.
Josephine's last years were marked with pain and sickness, but she always retained her cheerfulness. Whenever anyone asked her how she was, she would always smile and reply, "As the Master desires." She died at 8:10 p.m. on February 8, 1947. She is a patron saint of Sudan.
Josephine Bakhita's life seemed a tragedy at first, full of suffering and pain, but despite what she experienced, she was able to find hope and forgive others in the midst of her trials. She touched those around her with her love, her gentleness, and her ever-present smile. And her life shows that no matter who a person is or what they've been through, God's love can change them for the better.
Saint Josephine Bakhita, pray for us. Our honorable mentions for this week are Saint Joseph of Leonissa, Saint Agatha, Saint Paul Mickey and Companions, Saint Colette, Saint Jerome Emiliani, and Saint Scholastica. And of course, there are thousands of other saints who undoubtedly have their feast days this week, but there are so many of them that there is no way we could list them all here.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Saint of the Week. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Peace be to you.